Hello once again, and Merry Christmas, and thanks for joining us for this 25th day of December, Sunday's Alaska weather. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, there we go. Red area there, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. That's a high wind warning that stays out through tonight and actually through Monday until 6 p.m. Monday for northeast winds continuing to gust up around 60 miles an hour there for Savunga, Gamble, and Tin City in Wales, and Teller in those areas. Over the interior, that's advisories for wind chill, and winter weather advisories. And those are out tonight through 6 p.m. tomorrow afternoon in the east, and actually around Galena, Tanna, some of those ending about noontime. But that'll continuing all those areas through tonight with gusty winds and wind chills down to 50 below zero or so, and areas of blowing snow, reducing visibility to a half mile at times. And then over the southeast coast, snow advisories continue there for the northern panhandle for several more inches of snow. And also, a winter weather advisory is out now for Thompson Pass, and that's 6 p.m. this evening through 9 a.m. Monday morning, and expect sustained winds of 30 to 40 miles an hour with gusts to 55 miles per hour. And an additional snowfall of 4 to 8 inches of new snow accumulation through Monday morning, so falling tonight there. And with those winds blowing, snow could reduce visibilities to a half mile or even less at times. You can see Valdez expecting less snowfall, about 1 to 3 inches of new snow. So some more moisture coming into the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound area, and the eastern Kenai Peninsula as well. Otherwise, on satellite imagery, you can see a big storm coming up into the Gulf of Alaska, taking a more northwesterly turn, beginning to slow down now as the front brings gale and storm force winds to the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle with gusts of 40 to 60 miles per hour into the Panhandle, the heaviest rainfall amounts over the southern southeast coast. And also Kodiak Island, seeing kind of a continuous back and forth between rain and snow with temperatures in the mid to upper 30s at the state airport there. So higher elevations, Kodiak Island seeing nothing but snow. And then cold upper level low that's pulled out over the Bering Sea yesterday and last evening, continuing to move westward, and so the winds, strong winds, have died off over the Pribilof Islands. We're gusting anywhere from 30 to 50 miles an hour out of the north and northeast, with continuous light snow there and temperatures down into the teens, lower teens this morning. But those winds with the low center pulling to the west, they've swung around more to the east and southeast, and temperatures starting to recover, and also the winds have really dropped off there, but snow showers all the way down to Adak, Atka, and even towards Shimmy, with the snowfall levels down to sea level south of the Aleutians. Eastern Aleutians, same thing, and the Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay, the heavier precipitation you saw overnight last night is tapered off this afternoon. And again, wet conditions, but up over the interior, still well below zero. Gusty winds, still gusting this afternoon, early afternoon, up 60 to 70 miles per hour across the Yukon Delta. And less wind, though, lighter winds on the north slope, allowing temperatures to fall into the minus 30 to minus 40, 45 below zero range around Umiat Airfield, and into the mid-minus 30s out to the eastern Arctic coast with the light southerly winds going on up there. And rolling that through again, you can see the low center kind of a complex low there coming into the Gulf, and that'll consolidate into one center and begin to pull more westward toward Kodiak Island today. 947 millibars there as it comes northward, and then the low out over the Bering Sea with widespread area of light snow and snow showers there from just south of St. Lawrence Island or near St. Lawrence Island, and all the way down to the Aleutians and beyond there, and westward to the Komodorskis, to the east coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula, and then drier, colder conditions up to the north over the Russian Far East into the interior of Alaska out to the Arctic coast, with some clouds over the eastern and southeast interior and precipitation on the increase there. In fact, actually the heaviest rainfall amounts, about 1.5 inches fell in the last 24 hours at Ketchikan, with winds gusting anywhere from 40 to 60 miles per hour. Wind and precipitation was lighter over the northern panhandle today, but that'll increase as that front moisture lifts north and northwestward this evening and overnight tonight. And for tonight, that front swings into south central Alaska and the southeast interior and breaks apart as it moves into the mountainous terrain, the Alaska Range there. But that'll bring a chance of snow up over the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, with a little bit milder temperatures, but staying below zero. But definitely notably warmer south and east of the Alaska Range over for tonight, tomorrow, and tomorrow night, and into the next day, with some increasing precipitation and solid cloud cover into those areas. Rain and snow continues Kodiak Island, but those winds coming down from the 45 mile per hour wind gusts you saw today, those will diminish considerably tonight. Still a chance of snow and snow showers, Bristol Bay, as well as all the central and southern Bering Sea, the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. But wind's not too bad out there. You can see pretty light and variable, actually, over the central Aleutians, so the Fox Islands, and then northwest 15 to 20, maybe 25 for the Alaska Peninsula, so not too bad there. And also the strongest winds with the low center pulling westward move into the Gulf of Alaska and up along the North Gulf Coast, and so less wind, lighter precipitation for the Panhandle. Warm air continues to move northward, so rain in the south, snow in the north, and a mixture in between. And for snowfall totals now, looking Sunday afternoon through Monday night, you can see heavy snows coming into the southern Kenai Peninsula and into western Prince William Sound, looking for 6 to 8 inches for Whittier, again, from now until through Monday night into Tuesday morning. Girdwood, Alyeska could pick up 18 to 24 inches, and then it really tapers off. You get into the downsloping blocking of the mountains there, the Chugach Mountains, Hope down to 1 to 2 inches, and actually I believe that's I got that backwards. Girdwood, 4 to 6 inches. Turnagain Pass will see the 18 to 24 inches of snow. Sorry about that. And then down toward Moose Pass, 6 to 8 inches. Seward, 3 to 4 inches. And then less than an inch down toward Homer and those areas, Seldovia. Okay, outlook for Monday. Tomorrow, looking at, again, that front washing out over the southeast interior, kind of moving into eastern Bristol Bay, areas of snow there, areas of snow south central Alaska and south and east of the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin in some areas. Heaviest precipitation, as I just mentioned, will be on the southern Kenai Peninsula and western Prince William Sound, as well as the North Gulf Coast. We'll see a fair amount of rain and snow. Panhandle stays unsettled, chance of snow in the north, mixture of rain and snow in the central areas there, and then rain down towards sea level. And stays cold, below zero over the interior. Some clouds there over the Yukon Flats, maybe some flurries, but increasing winds there through the western Brooks Range area. And then on Tuesday, chance of snow, some leftover moisture may bring some flurries into the Yukon Flats and along all of the Yukon and Kuskokwim River Valley areas, central Tanana Valley, and chance of snow, that weakening low center moving up into the southern Kenai Peninsula, probably be cloudy with areas of light snow across all of south central Alaska, and stays unsettled for the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle with light winds. Winds will be quite light with less gradient. In fact, even over the interior, you can see winds will diminish considerably, especially over the Yukon Delta there and into the central interior. Out west, snow for the Alaska Peninsula, snow showers for the Pribilofs, rain and snow for the Aleutians, but snow showers for the far western Aleutians. And moving on to lows tonight, again, staying above zero now for south central Alaska. Highs Monday afternoon, 20s to near 30. Warmer in the Panhandle. Lows, again, staying above zero in the Copper River Basin. 20s for south central Alaska. Highs lower 40 southern panhandle, highs in the near freezing to the north. Up to the north, well below zero tonight again, staying below zero for tomorrow. And not quite so cold Tuesday morning, but staying below zero, but not quite as far for Tuesday afternoon. The southwest coast near zero tonight, and single numbers tomorrow, and lows in the 20s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather for Monday morning. Good VFR from the Arctic coast right on down across the central western interior down to Togiak and northern Bristol Bay, as well as the southwest coast. Cape Newfoundland marginal VFR, basically VFR for Nunivak and St. Lawrence Island. IFR, though, Pribilofs down across the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, and a good portion of the Panhandle. IFR tomorrow morning. And then for the afternoon, areas of marginal VFR over the eastern interior, especially the Yukon Flats area, and also south of the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, and then west-southwest all the way out to the Yukon Delta. Marginal VFR up to St. Lawrence Island, and then becoming VFR for the Pribilofs as IFR shifts eastward there, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and Prince William Sound, pushing up into southern Cook Inlet, so covering Kamishak, Kachemak Bays, as well as Resurrection Bay into Passes Canal, Whittier, Portage, and as far east as Cape St. Elias. Otherwise, marginal VFR, Yakutat, on down to Dixon Entrance. And for Tuesday morning, IFR, most of the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea, marginal for the Pribilofs, another narrow band of IFR there. St. Matthew Island kind of thickens up along the southwest coast into Bristol Bay, and that extends up into the Kuskokwim Valley in western Alaska Range. IFR up near or north of Anchor Point now, southern Cook Inlet, but not still a ways away from Kenai, Soldotna, and those areas. But marginal VFR for the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, IFR there into the Copper River Basin. Marginal VFR, most of interior Alaska up to the Brooks Range with the North Slope and Arctic Coast, Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, stay VFR. And for Tuesday afternoon, improving over the Panhandle, but holding on to IFR northern channels there and over toward the border, as well as Yakutat. VFR eastern interior, Copper River Basin, band of IFR working up now past, well into northern Cook Inlet, with marginal VFR possibly into Turnagain Arm, but the Matanuska Valley looks pretty good, and the eastern Susitna Valley, Talkeetna's VFR, Copper River Basin, eastern interior, IFR over portions of the west central interior, and a couple of bands of IFR there out over the Bering Sea, with some VFR as well, especially for the Pribilofs, into the Yukon, Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, all VFR. Passes, Anatuvik, VFR. Adigan, VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill starting out marginal, trending toward IFR as the day progresses, especially into the afternoon hours. Rainy, marginal VFR the entire day, and windy, starting out pretty good. VFR early on, becoming marginal VFR through the remainder of the day. Isabel, marginal at times. Mintasta, mostly marginal. And Tanita, occasionally marginal. Portage, mostly IFR. And for Chilkoot and White, a chance of marginal VFR. Freezing levels, kind of a 2,000-foot pocket there over the southwest interior, but the surface still well south of the Pribilofs, cutting right between Unimak and Unalaska Island, and then up, pushing northward now, almost into northern Cook Inlet and into the southern Copper River Basin with 2,000 feet. Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, into the northern Panhandle, 4,000 feet, just down to the south across Prince of Wales Island, and just south of Misty Fjords. And for icing, kind of a east-west oriented wavy band there with the lighter icing out over the Bering Sea, could be mixed below about 10,000 feet, very isolated moderate there, maybe a little bit more in the way of considerable moderate, spotty areas there for the North Gulf Coast, and then into Yakutat, and maybe Prince of Wales Island, otherwise isolated moderate above about 5,000 feet there. And for the jet stream, main jet well south of the forecast area, you can see jet max there cutting across British Columbia, but southerly 70 knots into the Panhandle, east 70 Yukon Delta, on out into the central Bering Sea. Otherwise, pretty light for much of the remainder of the area. And for 9,000 feet, a little bit pickup in the winds at this elevation, 40 to 60 knots around that low south of the Kenai Peninsula, and westerlies 50 knots across eastern Aleutians, 60 knot easterlies there for the western Brooks Range into the northern Bering Sea or the Bering Strait. About the same pattern at 3,000 feet. Taking a look at turbulence here, considerable moderate turbulence, southern Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, into the southwest interior, as well as the Aleutian Range, Kodiak Island, and a big area.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us here today is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, GINA for short. And Eric, you frequently come on the show to tell us about these really cool things that we're doing with satellites over Alaska and how we can use these really awesome tools. But I'm thinking all the while there has to be a mad scientist somewhere working on the next cool thing in the satellite laboratory. What is being developed today?
Right. Well, you know, when I was a kid growing up in the boonies in North Dakota there, on Sunday after church, the old people, like my parents and their parents, would gather and have coffee and talk. And I kind of eavesdropped on them a little bit. And the theme of a lot of these conversations seemed to be, well, isn't it amazing what they can do these days, someone would say.
Sure.
And I was thinking, oh, I don't know, I was too young.
Right.
Well, now, I'm old enough in the weather satellite business.
You can remember when.
The new generation of weather satellites, I'm starting to say, isn't it amazing what they can do these days? Because it's always improving.
Yes.
Maybe an analogy here is like television. Television started in black and white, then it went to color. Analog signal transitioned to digital here a number of years ago. Standard definition becomes high definition.
Right.
Well, weather satellites are changing too. First weather satellites went up around 1960, not that long ago.
No.
It's comparatively young science. And every time a new series of satellite is launched, we learn from the past, so the mad scientists decide, well, we could make the next satellite even better in such and such a respect.
Yes.
And now the United States is on the verge of launching, or in progress of launching, a series of new geostationary satellites that are better than ever before.
Okay.
Let's take a look at some of the previews of what these new satellites can do.
Peek inside the lab here, okay.
Yeah, and so we'll peek in, and here are some mad scientists and mad technicians dressed in bunny suits. This is, believe it or not, this is the business end of a weather satellite under construction in a clean room. You don't want a speck of dust on the lens of a weather satellite's camera. So this is done in a clean environment. They are building a geostationary satellite there.
Oh, cool.
This new generation of satellites, if you had to answer the question, why are these better? Why do we care?
Okay.
You could answer it with 3 words: faster, better, more. The new generation of satellites are faster than the older ones. The images are sharper, they're better, and there's more spectral channels. We'll talk about that.
Any one of these called Steve Austin sounds faster, better, stronger.
Yeah. You know what, though? These things cost more than $6 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're pricey, but they are an essential tool for the Weather Service to fulfill its mission of protecting lives and property.
Exactly.
You got to have the tool to do the job, and it helps all of us when we get the accurate forecast, the warning in time, and this is the tool. Faster. On left here, we see what the old generation of satellites could scan in 5 minutes. On the right, that's what you get in 5 minutes, the whole planet, or at least one side of it. So it's faster. That means you can take more images over a given amount of time and make smoother movie loops out of that. Because animating movie loops really helps you highlight a feature that maybe you can't see as well in a single image.
Does, yep.
Let's zoom into a small piece of real estate like Texas.
Sure.
And we can see here a satellite that has a 1-minute movie loop visible light. You can see thunderstorms boiling there.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, the rippling of the top of the thunderstorm. This is a fun movie loop. We're going to be able to see things like this more and more often because of the new satellites being generated. Some things are only evident in animation. So that's faster. Well, what's better? We're able to now have sharper imagery than before. The Japanese have a satellite that uses the same imager that is on the new generation of satellites that America is launching too. An imager, that's just a word for camera. It's the camera on a weather satellite. We have something called the Advanced Baseline Imager.
Sounds important.
ABI. It's important enough it has an acronym. Everything's an acronym. Well, an ABI-like instrument is here over the Western Pacific, and we can see this color image. This is what a human eye might see if you were riding on the satellite. But it's a little bit fuzzy. With new technology, you can post-process the image taken by the satellite to highlight and sharpen some of the features. So this image here of the Western Pacific then becomes this image. Thanks to the processing techniques, yes, this is the newest technology. So we've got a new satellite that can provide better data than ever before. And on the ground, we can process it better than before as well to really sharpen up the imagery and to give us a better view of the weather than ever before. So faster and better and more. What do we mean by more? Well, on the older generation of satellites, the imager, the camera, had 5 slices of the spectral pie, visible imagery, infrared imagery, something we can't see from the human eye. A lot of different slices of the pie. We're going from 5. The new imager has 16 slices. Each slice has its own relevance. Some are best for volcanic ash, for smoke, for dust, for telling the difference between smoke and dust, which can look similar under some infrared channels, but other ones bring out certain things. All of these 16 bands are important. In fact, some of the mad scientists, they didn't want 16, they wanted 24. There's always more you can do. But that'll be the next generation of satellites. So now we say, isn't it amazing what we can do these days? And you know what? It makes you think, well, what's the future going to be like too? It's so important to be able to know what's going on now in the weather. If you're going to forecast the future, you got to know where things are now. And satellites are the way to see that, especially in Alaska, where we don't have as many observations down on the ground. The satellites fill in the holes.
Yeah, really important stuff. And I love hearing about what we can see right now, but I love thinking about what is possible in the future. It's amazing stuff. And since you paid for it, it's a good time to learn about it. If you'd like, check out the website at www.goes-r.gov. And as I understand, it's a really easy website to use.
Oh yeah, a lot of good information about what these new satellites mean to Americans. And it's the Weather Service's mission to protect lives and property, and this is the tool how to do it.
Cool stuff, Eric. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today, and thank you for joining us right here in Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Gale warning, strongest on the north coast. The Panhandle for the day Monday, 35 knots southeast winds on the south coast, 40 knots on the north coast, and Lincoln Glacier Bay, north winds at 30 knots, east at 30 for Stevens Passage, southeast winds 25 knots for Clarence Strait. And for Tuesday, lighter winds out of the west, 25 knots for the south coast, and south winds 20 to 25 knots for the north coast. Northern inner channels, north winds at about 20 knots, northeast 20 for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Prince William Sound for Monday, gale warnings, east winds 35 knots with 9-foot seas. Gale warnings also for the North Gulf Coast for east winds 40 to 45 knots, seas 25 to 30 feet. Barren Islands, east winds 35 knots, gale warnings for Kamishak Bay. Northeast winds 45 knots, gale warnings for Cook Inlet, northeast winds 35 to 40 knots. And for Tuesday, lighter winds for Cook Inlet, north to northeast at 15 to 20 knots, seas 3 to 5 feet. And for Kamishak Bay, northwest winds 25 knots. Same thing for the Barren Islands. North Gulf Coast, east to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots. And for Prince William Sound, winds will be east at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. For Kodiak Island, north to northeast winds on Monday at 30 knots with 9 to 19-foot seas. Otherwise, Bristol Bay looking at a north wind for the day Monday at 25 knots. Seas around 4 feet there. Alaska Peninsula small craft advisories. West winds 25 to 30 knots with seas running 8 to 13 feet. And for Tuesday, Alaska Peninsula, gale warning, southeast winds 30 to 35 knots, seas 6 to 11 feet. Bristol Bay, south winds at 20 knots with 6-foot seas. And Kodiak Island, looking at small craft advisories for west winds 25 to 30 knots, and seas running 5 feet in Shelikof Strait, otherwise around 14 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, on Monday, west to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, seas running 7 to 9 feet. Central Aleutians, south to southwest winds 15 knots with 8 to 12-foot seas. And for the western Aleutians, Kisk Island to Shimia, north winds at 30 knots, seas 20 feet. And for Tuesday, western Aleutian, small craft advisories, north to northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. For Adak and Atka, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots. Gale warnings for the eastern Aleutians, for east to southeast winds 30 to 35 knots. Seas running 11 to 20 feet. And for the southwest coast, small craft advisories for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, north at 25 knots, Yukon Delta coast, northeast at 30 knots, Pribilofs, north at 15 with 8-foot seas. Gale warnings for St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island for northeast winds at 40 knots, and gale warnings also for Norton Sound, winds northeast 35 knots. And for Tuesday, Norton Sound, those east winds coming down to 20 knots, northeast 30 for St. Lawrence Island with 12-foot seas there. Lighter winds along the southwest coast out of the east, 15 to 20 knots. Southeast winds 30 knots for the Pribilofs, north 30 for St. Matthew Island. And on up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for Monday. Brisk wind advisories, east winds 30 knots, east winds at about 20 knots on the central coast, and picking back up to 25 knots western Arctic coast. The Chukchi Sea, north to northeast winds 30 to 35 knots. For Tuesday, for the Chukchi Sea, northeast winds 25 to 35 knots. Brisk wind advisories, western Arctic coast, northeast winds 30 knots. And also brisk wind advisories on the central coast, northeast at 25, and brisk wind advisories continue for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline for east winds at 30 knots. And for tonight, that big low center begins to pull toward Kodiak Island and weaken. The front swings into the southeast interior and also weakens. That'll bring rain and snow and continued wet conditions and windy conditions for the Panhandle, with increasing rain and snow along the North Gulf Coast, with some areas of snow over the southeast interior. Periods of snow and snow showers, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, much of the Bering Sea, and the Aleutians, with the strongest winds over the northwest and northern Bering Sea, and stays windy over the interior, and that begins to ease up a little tomorrow. Still pretty breezy over interior Alaska. Warmer conditions with a little bit better chance of snow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.